And so we find ourselves on a Tuesday evening, 7th of September, after a long day, perhaps knowing that we have our own laments, the things that could have gone better perhaps throughout the day, the things we perhaps should have gotten completed that just didn't have time to do. Our first reading this evening is from Lamentations. And of course, lamentation is an expression of sorrow or mourning or regret. It's very human to have lamentations. It's very human to be focused on what we lose or regret. The problem is, it's very self-centered. Remembering it over and over leaves my soul downcast within me. And so, is that all there is? Sometimes when we experience loss, certainly more significant than things we didn't get done today, divorce, separation, death of a loved one, that is quite significant. And so we do focus on ourselves. We try and make sense of these things. But the problem is, if we get stuck there, then that is a problem. Because we can fall into the depths of despair very, very quickly and very easily. And on that slippery slope, it is so hard to get ourselves out of it because we're focused on ourselves. Even in those who love us, who want the best for us, who try to be that counterpoint, that counterbalance to what we're experiencing, sometimes even they have a very difficult time pulling us up out of that sense of despair. And yet the lamentation has its own counterpoint in the Scriptures. But I will call this to mind as my reason to have hope. The favors of the Lord are not exhausted. They are renewed each morning. Therefore, I will hope in him. And so we find there is a counterpoint that we must remember in the depths of our hearts. It's more than just a phrase. It's that which brings us to that sense of unique faith. Certainly that is expressed in the responsorial psalm this evening. Keep me safe, O God. You are my hope. And so our conviction of faith in God leads us to focus on a different aspect of our lives, a different aspect of our journey of faith. It takes us away from lamentation. It allows us to move forward in this journey. And so our new focus is outward versus inward. It is no longer self-centered, but it is other-centered. Perhaps it begins with the loved ones who try to help us come out of the depths of despair, to remember that hopefulness we have in God, because they are at that moment for us a reflection of Christ himself, the Good Shepherd, who is searching us out and bringing us back. Confidence in God's love and care for us is that which helps to turn the tide, stem the tide, calm the winds of an otherwise stormy sea that we often experience many times, day after day after day. The challenges of divorce, separation, or loss. A stormy sea, definitely. But there is one who will calm the seas for us. And if we still need a reason to question a new focus, that's very human. But as the Lord gives us that new vision, we, like St. Paul, have to ask ourselves, if God is for us, who can be against us? Well, there's a lot of people, Lord. Let me give you the list, okay? Let's start with this morning about 8:05. As soon as I walked in and got by the copier, didn't even get to my desk. Let's start there. Doesn't mean we're not going to be human. It doesn't mean we're not going to first have that response that's very human. But the Lord wants us to get beyond the human response, not be stuck there, but to have that response of faithfulness and hopefulness. And so we do come to that ultimate new line or new way of questioning. Not so much, what am I losing? What am I regretting? But rather, our faith firmly grounded in God. We will ask the same questions as Paul did when he spoke to the Romans. What will separate us from the love of Christ if God is for us? And he lists those unique things that they experience on a daily basis. Anguish, distress, persecution, famine. Very, very real experiences of life, not just a thought. But those unique things in life that are just right here, and that's all we can see sometimes. And it is that unique faith that helps move it aside and allows us to see with that new vision, the vision of Christ. And Paul reminds us, as we have that unique vision, then all these things we conquer overwhelmingly through him who loved us. And Paul says, for I am convinced. He doesn't think about it. And we know Paul is like the bull in the china shop. There is no stopping him sometimes. Once he has his mind, his heart, his spirit, and soul set, boom, he's off. And he's right there. He gives his heart and soul to whatever he is doing. Remember, heart and soul to the best persecutor of the church prior to his conversion. And yet, once he was no longer self-centered, self-absorbed, and self-focused, once his vision was turned outward, he began to see clearly. He used that same strength, though, now, at this time, as one of the greatest defenders of the church, of God's people. He found that strength and used it to God's advantage, not just to his own advantage. And so what will separate us? Paul is convinced that nothing can separate us from the love of God. And he talks about angels, principalities, height and depth. The things that we see as just like, whoa, that's huge. That's more power than I can imagine. How can I ever overcome that? And Paul says, not even that will separate us from the love of God. But we know there is one thing, and only one thing that will separate us from the love of God, and that is ourselves. Peter brings that point to fore in the gospel this evening. He has great confidence in Jesus, certainly. But Peter's hope in Jesus stems from his desire to place 100% of his faith in Jesus, and he's not able to do that. He's very, very curious. From the very moment he is called, come follow me. He's very curious. He listens, he watches, he questions, he asks. And more, he's willing to give more of himself to faith in Christ. However, he has been disappointed before through the false prophets. He has been, like most of us, burned by life itself. Oh yeah, I trusted that person. Boy, oh boy, I should not have done it. Man, they're blabbing all over the office. Oh. Well, teaches me a lesson. Guess what I will not do anymore? And our hearts can become very hardened. But the love of Christ must keep the heartbeat of faith alive within each of us. Peter knows this, and he struggles within himself to get to that unique point. He's always hesitant, though. Always hesitant. Because, as a human being, like you and I, there's always the potential and the possibility for more hurt, for more grief, Ugh, if I hear that phone ring one more time, if you bring that up just once more, ugh. And we take it to prayer. And God, could you just do something? Just do something. Make it better. We want to have that same conviction of faith. And then when our prayers aren't answered the way we want them to be answered, like Peter, well, that 100% drops back down to like 95, 92, 90%. We waver back and forth and back and forth. He wants so much to believe. But his ability to focus is quite challenged. Like most of us, we have spiritual ADD. And that's a problem, especially in our life of prayer. How long can any of us really stay focused on any one thing before the littlest thing just kind of distracts us? Doesn't take much. And if there are emotions attached to it, lots of luck. And so that is the gospel. The emotion of fear and the potential for death is right there. And it's not just Peter, it's all the disciples. They're hoping and praying that they're going to be saved. They know, and Peter knows as a fisherman, what it is to be out on the rough seas at this point in time. And then they see Jesus. They think, first of all, it's a ghost. It can't possibly be God. And yet it is. And so Peter all of a sudden brings his focus on the Lord, but he tests him. Just like you and I, as any other human being would do. We test the Lord. He says, all right, if it is you, and he's hanging onto the boat, if it is you, tell me to step out on the water and come to you. I want my faith to just be right at 100%. Peter's thinking, nope, he's not going to do it. He's not going to put me in any kind of jeopardy or peril. So I will just hang on for dear life on this little boat ride in the waves. And the Lord says, okay, come on, Pete, let's go. Step out of the boat. Really? Darn it. Ooh. Fine. And he musters up that unique courage, that faith, that strength that he didn't think he had. And he steps out. He steps on the water, begins walking toward Jesus, but his focus is only on the Lord. Reminiscent of come and follow me. Come to me. And that's sometimes where our human nature is our own stumbling block. In those times of great anxiety and stress and regret, in the times that we lament, times of loss and difficulty, we don't listen to the Lord enough. We try to put words in his mouth. And he asks of us something that is so out of left field. Really? You want me to do what? Pick up the phone and say what? You want me to forgive who? All right. Because in prayer it's easy. But then when our focus is taken away from the Lord, all of a sudden, this is not as easy as I thought it was going to be. And Peter starts to sink. And all of a sudden, again, his faith level drops from that 99.9%, it drops rapidly. Lord, save me. Lord, do something. And the Lord does. He stretches out his hand and he catches Peter. He doesn't let him fall. He doesn't let him go back into the depths of despair. But he's right there with him. He's right there with us. Over and above anything we experience, can imagine or hope for or pray for, he is there with and for us. But he does ask that very question. Why did you doubt? Your faith pushed you out of the boat, caused you to step out onto the water. 99.9% moving to 100%. But why did you doubt? Peter would think, well, Lord, that's kind of a obvious question. I'm quite human. And that's just part and parcel of my humanity. A character flaw, if you will. That doubt that caused him to take his focus off of Jesus, doubting that he would really be with the Lord or be saved, or the Lord would actually respond to him. So, pretty simply, sorry, part of my humanity got the best of me. And sometimes we ask ourselves, why did I even start this prayer? Why do I even bother having faith and hope? Why? Sometimes people will ask us the same question. You've been through a lot. Why do you even bother going to church? Why do you even believe in God? Look at all that you've been through. And like Peter, we can simply say, because every time that I cry out, Lord, save me from the depths of despair. Save me from the anguish and the sorrow and the regret. Save me from those moments where I want to be fully human and boy, do I want to say something to somebody. Oh, save me from that. Every time that happens, and I say, Lord, save me, I know He will save me.